We should be able to gain muscle year-round, even when cutting. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. Again, a topic of controversy that some people will not understand. They'll say, no, that's not possible, that's not how it works. Yet, most of the best experts agree that it is how it works, including people who have competed in bodybuilding, who are researchers and things in the field. Everyone who really understands these concepts agrees on this. We should be able to gain muscle every single month for the entirety of your training career until you get so old that the age becomes a problem, right? And hormone profiles interfere. All right, and here's why. Because recomposition is possible. Okay, if you lose muscle or strength during a cut, you messed up. You flat out messed up. You made a mistake. That shouldn't really realistically happen if you do everything correctly. All right? Just like I tell people, you should be able to gain minimal to zero fat when you're bulking, because you should bulk slow enough that it doesn't happen. Bulking faster doesn't cause you to gain muscle more quickly. That's what the evidence shows. So here's the thing when it comes to losing body fat. Everyone wants to cut so quickly, right? Just like everyone wants to bulk too quickly. Like, well, I just want to get the cut over. I want to get real lean real fast or whatever. It's like, okay. So then they try to lose fat too quickly. Calories go too low. Their training gets compromised. Okay, so what happens there? If your training gets compromised and you're forced to cut the volumes back, or forced to reduce mechanical tension, all these things because you can't recover, what happens? Well, you start shedding lean tissue. If your protein goes too low, you start shedding lean tissue. Okay? But what's the reality of that? You're just losing too quick. Now, people will argue, yeah, but I could lose quickly and then regain it off muscle memory. Well, what's the point of that? Why are you going to lose muscle and then regain it off muscle memory? Why can't we just not get so fat that it's not a problem? And then you cut slow and gain muscle. Because we know in a small calorie deficit, plenty of studies show that when protein is really high, training is perfect, right? You're training hard enough to stimulate new growth. Even advanced athletes will gain muscle while losing fat. Okay, so if recomposition like that is possible, because recomping doesn't have to mean, hey, we stay the same weight. Well, we would call that a recomp, but it's based on the term recomposition, which means we're gaining muscle and losing fat at the same time. But if we have numerous studies showing that does happen even in advanced lifters and advanced athletes, why can't you cut slow enough for it to happen? Why do we have protein overfeeding studies where people argue about whether they were in a deficit or not, right? So I've seen that argument made. I've seen Greg Nuckols and other people present science-based information on that, who are like, well, they probably were in a deficit. That's why they lost body fat and they lose body weight, because not only the thermic effect of the protein in those protein overfeeding studies, but they probably underate because they're trying to eat 350, 400 grams of protein in these studies, and the researchers are making them force it down, and they lose appetite, and even though they think they're in a surplus, they're in a deficit, so they lose body weight. Okay, let's assume that is true, right? Because that is an explanation people like that, some science-based experts have put forward as to what happened in those studies. My friend Alex Leaf co-authored one of those studies, by the way. All right, so let's assume that he's right, and they just fed so much protein that it ended up creating a deficit. They all gained muscle. Whoa, so then what does this tell us? That as long as it's a fairly high calorie, and therefore very small deficit, and the protein is really high, we'll gain some muscle when in a deficit, at least a small amount. Well, shouldn't that be our goal? Instead of people pursuing quick cuts, shouldn't the goal be, hey, not only do I want to cut slow enough to preserve my muscle instead of losing muscle, Why can't I gain muscle? Okay. This is when we start thinking about an intelligent approach. Why can't we gain muscle and just cut really slow? Because we're still making gains. People's explanation, well, I just want to cut quick and go right back to bulking. Okay? But if you want to make gains, why don't you just make gains year round? I mean, that would be the intelligent approach. So even if you're cutting, if you just cut slow, you're still making gains. You don't have to get back to bulking. You're making progress. You're making progress. That's just as good as bulking, technically. Oh man. Yeah, you got so many people. Why spin my wheels if I don't eat bulk really fast? Are you sure you're spinning your wheels? Or maybe you're just getting some leverage increase from the extra water and fat from the bulk. So you're moving a little more weight. It's not because of the muscle, because just your leverage is improved. And maybe your training's not dialed in the rest of the time. Maybe your training's just not dialed in, and the only reason you see progress is because you're cutting range of motion and getting leverage benefits from the water and the fat and all these things. Maybe you need to train harder. Maybe you need to train better. Could that be the factor? Right? So maybe their diet's not dialed in. They're not eating enough protein. They're not sleeping enough. They're not training enough. They're not doing the things that they need to do in order to make the gains. Because if they were, they wouldn't need that big surplus. So if people were just patient and they did things correctly, they wouldn't even be in these situations. Right? The reason people get into situations to do that is because they get impatient, or they think, and I've been guilty of this in the past, right? They have to bulk so fast that they're gaining fat. Not necessary. And the same thing with your cut. They cut so fast that they lose muscle. But if you just do it slow, you never stop making gains. If you just cut slow, dial your training in, make sure your protein is really high, you'll gain muscle during your cut. Yeah, it'll take longer, but you never stopped making progress, so it's worth it. Right? It's worth it. Makes a lot of sense. Okay? So back to my point, we should be gaining muscle all the time, including on our cuts. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.